I guess kind of the next question here is for the people that are afraid of how quick it went up and the fact that it might not ever get to 125 maybe until the next couple of years, right? It was one of those sort of moments where it reaches such a peak and it takes forever to reach that peak again. Or for the people that are still concerned, it could fall another 50% from here in regards to valuation. How are you guys thinking about the current price, the valuation, and the speed at which it went up and down, which is making people feel like there's no actual floor to this stock? Arnie, any thoughts on that?
Well, how do I feel the valuation? I believe here we are really talking about a very difficult environment because typically when you evaluate a company, you try to understand the story, and depending on the story that you have, that story evolves into a certain direction with the metrics going into that direction. Therefore, also the valuation should converge to those moments. And the harsh reality is that in order to evaluate properly Palantir, we can just make an educated guess, because in order to say, okay, this is the correct price as of today, we should know what will be the future the future numbers. And even if we had like full Palantir stack, full stream of with their own ontology, I believe there would be a big margin of error. Who knows? But so that is the premise, so that when we see the multiples, like right now, Palantir trading at 120 forward price to free cash flow and 53 EV sales, those numbers are obscene, but are obscene under the typical framework of a regular company like Costco, like I don't know, Walmart and so on. Like these are numbers that you would probably never find into this kind of companies. But here we are talking about something unique, something special, because for instance, differently from Snowflake, differently from ServiceNow, which both of them are clearly showing signs of reducing scalability as they grow. With Palantir, we are seeing the opposite. What I mean with that is, while these other companies, as they grow, they tend to become heavier or slightly worse in terms of efficiency, what we are seeing with Palantir is actually the opposite. It really looks like that the more Palantir grows, the better it becomes. And frankly, I believe we are still at very early stages from that. So a simple comparison can be seen, for instance, here. While CRM, Snowflake, and ServiceNow revenue per employee tends to grow, but is more or less stuck, is very gradually growing. With Palantir, we see that since the launch of AAP, the efficiency that Palantir is obtaining per employee is going to the moon. And this reflects the power of the platform, which essentially tells us Palantir is not investing much more money, but is delivering outside output. While when I see, for instance, Snowflake that just released the results, we just see that they are hiring people like like nothing ever happened, and more or less they generate the same amount of revenue as Palantir. Snowflake literally has twice the number of employees to generate the same number of revenue. Someone tells AI, Palantir delivers. So this is the premise that we need to take in consideration when we talk about the valuation, because if we look too much at the metric side, we fail to capture the dynamic. And the dynamic that there is here is this effing company is growing a lot while not spending. That is like infinite ROIC, and infinite ROIC must be rewarded.
Arnie, to push back here, wouldn't people say the reason it got to 125 is because people only cared about the narrative, the story you're talking about, and not the price of sales, the PE, etc. But that's how it got to almost a $300 billion market cap, which is why it collapsed so quickly.
Well, it's probably an overreaction from emotions, but emotions that were backed by results. Because what we are seeing in the last results that frankly really surprised me was that was not a gradual acceleration. That was a a dominance play is actually in place. Like it looks like, let's make a comparison. Have you noticed how well Uber grew after COVID? So during COVID, you had a lot of competitors trying to catch up market share, but there was a fight going on. But then the competitors collapsed, Lyft stayed behind, and what happened to Uber essentially went into the take-all modality. What we are seeing with Palantir right now is a take-all dynamic into a huge market that is growing a lot. So it's like doors open, full field to conquer for Palantir. So what I see as a difference from the people I try to talk with that try to push me back on the valuation is like, okay, fair. The multiples are high again against the expectations, which are now more positive, but they tend to converge into that 30% margin and 30% growth. But what if actually this momentum keeps compounding and this 35% growth that we are currently having is just the beginning of the true acceleration growth? Because frankly, if the wind stays this strong and actually improves as Palantir can showcase more results and have this network effect compounding, I would not be surprised seeing a gradual acceleration toward the 50%, which is more or less where US commercial is actually driving the business at. So overall, and like long story short, yes, the multiples look expensive, but given all the development that we are currently seeing, literally everywhere, apart from Germany, literally everywhere, government side, the commercial side, I frankly see that the real risk here is underestimating how well stuff are going.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Matt, your thoughts on the current valuation and if there's more downside in your opinion?
I don't know. I'm actually kind of curious and surprised by the rhetoric that I'm hearing from the folks, hearing that they thought it was overvalued in the chat, and not necessarily the chat, but rather the panel here. Heard pretty much the opposite the last few weeks. But anyway, going to where I think the thought process that I have is it could obviously pull back further. But in terms of, do I think it's going to take forever to get back to that 125 level? No. And I think 2021 is a good example of that. I think when it hit $60 billion market cap for the first time, people were very much thinking that, okay, it peaked out in 2021. It's never going to get back to that place ever again. And obviously in 2024, we blew past $60 billion in market cap, and people start to see the true potential of the organization. Do I think we're potential for downside? Of course. Like you guys stated, while it's a great business and I think it will eventually be $1 trillion company, the numbers have to show up. Obviously, I think they have the mindset to get there. I think they have the foundation to get there, but the numbers unfortunately just have to show up for them to actually demonstrate how much value and importance that, I think a lot of people see and hear the importance, but do they actually feel the importance in terms of the actual numbers being there? And I don't think that's there as of yet. But in terms of having the fundamentals, I think you had the fundamentals to at least build that foundation to get back to being a $500 billion to $1 trillion company. What else was I going to state there? Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious, and I want to push back to the panel. I mean, it's not like Palantir is isolated in this retracement. We're seeing a lot of other speculative or more high growth names being impacted with this as well. So we could be in this conversation next week and the price could be back up to $95, depending on what the heck happens with the rest of news with tariffs and the ongoing discussions that are going on there. And we'll find out more about that Tuesday. So I'm a little bit surprised to hear that everyone is kind of saying, oh, overvalued, when in reality, just a few weeks back, everyone was saying, well, momentum is why people are trading the stock and buying the stock. It doesn't matter about valuations.
Momentum and valuation are completely different, right? Like from a valuation brand, there's no way in God's green earth you can say that when it was trading at 500 PE or whatever, that's a normal valuation.
But I beg to differ, Dom. That's exactly what Amir and Arnie were saying just 3 weeks ago.
No, I didn't hear that. You didn't hear that from me.
No, I didn't hear you. That's why I didn't say you.
I would agree. Look, what I heard over the past couple of weeks, quite frankly, even going into earnings, I think all of us thought it was going to tank at 85, which is where it's at right now.
I heard those words out of your mouth, Amit.
No, I think everyone here basically tried to figure out a way to justify why it was getting to 100 and 110. All of us were coming up with whatever analogies or conclusions, but I don't think anyone ever said the numbers themselves at 100 times price to sales made sense. Because, and here's the biggest evidence for that. Did any of us buy this thing at 125? Raise your hand. I mean, I don't think anyone realized. Arnie, I mean, what were your thoughts at 125? I don't think you thought it was the cheapest stock in the world.
Well, no, for me it was like people want to pay me much more for this, and the more days go, the more they want to pay for the same thing. Okay, go ahead. I'll not follow you, but I'll be happy if you become crazy scared to add more. So in those situations, like the real risk is you start having a full momentum of the news flow that actually translates into business value, and maybe you are thinking, oh, but now at the next pullback I will add, and that pullback essentially almost never happens. Like for instance, isn't this like the risk as of today is having a dynamic like once it passed the $20 mark or the $30 mark, which was very hard to break into. And once it broke that, it's like everybody's craving now. Imagine if we had the opportunity to just buy Palantir at 30 with numbers as of today. So since we're not talking about a company operating into a mean reversion world, but we are talking about a company that is literally at the edge of potentially dominance. Once you keep winning, you keep winning. Like as you mentioned also, momentum keeps building momentum, and you never know. Like if rather than having a market dropping, we had like a press release, crazy press release of, oh, Palantir is working with Dodge, something like that. Maybe like we would have been already at a crazy 150, and we don't know. So my perspective on that is always have a position that keeps you a little bit detached, like motivated, but a little bit detached, so that these huge swings, which are like part of the routine with a very high beta stock with like Palantir, don't really affect your mind. Because if a sudden crash or a sudden spike changes your emotions, it means that probably you are overexposed.
Yeah, well, and it trades at a 3 times beta, right? And I should probably, so anytime anything trades at a 3 times beta, you're going to see bigger market drops for that stock than the normal market. But Matt, to continue on valuation, let me kind of clear up too with my comments. I look at 2 kinds of different valuation. I look at, there's what analysts want to see, which they can only see in their spreadsheets, which are the next, 6 months to a year on a PE and price to sales and what they consider is overvalued, undervalued. And so obviously, you can buy at 120. You may take a lot longer before you get additional growth from that 120 since we ran up so much. But as a long-term holder, I bet you'd still be happy with your returns. But since we've done so much homework on this company, we know at least gradually of where, people will reasonably pay for that company and what it has been worth. But I think there's another type of valuation, which is what we're all here about, which is the overall understanding of the true TAM and the expansion of what this ontology and what this technology does. All 5 of us understand this technology. And so, obviously we're a little greedy, right? Like you don't want to buy at 120 when like, hey, I'll probably go back to 100 or 80. But they only have, I'm looking here, 711 customers, guys. 711 customers that are doing this kind of revenue with 0 debt. Do you know how many employees Snowflake has? No knock to them. There's just a lot of companies out there that need a lot of salespeople. They need a lot of marketing dollars. And this company doesn't do any of that. They don't do any marketing. They don't have very few salespeople, and they're closing business on their schedule, on their time, on growing and exponentially expanding. So I think we're just, we are really going to see that expand phase in the next, year or two. and further down the line, because it's not like people are going to be ripping this out of their business once they get it going.
Just
Amir?
just to tell you a number, Snowflake right now has 11,000 total customers, of which 700 belongs to the Forbes 2000. So, and Palantir, we are talking about 700 in total.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for growth. A lot of room for growth. Amir, your thoughts on valuation?
Yeah, just on that last, before I forget the thought. Yeah, the impressive part is even if Palantir acquired 0 customers in the fourth quarter, they still would have grew 20%, which just speaks to the argument that Arnie was making about the scaling up of existing customers and how exponential it is in nature. I think that's one of the most impressive things about Palantir. And so on the valuation side, just need to clear up. I don't know what content of me Matt has been consuming, but I think I've been very consistent and public in giving out what I consider to be fair value. It has never exceeded 70 historically, more in the 50s and more recently 60s. In a video with Amit and in the past weekly, I shared a scenario while making it clear that it is not my valuation. A few times over, I said that a case can be made for $100 by using 30% growth and 60% free cash flow to the firm margins. That would justify $100 per share. But that's not my valuation, and that's not something I rely on. Maybe you are confusing that scenario with me saying that it's cheap, but that's not the case. Just want to clear that up. But as for the valuation, I recently revalued it. It's closer to 70 now, fair value for me personally, which is why I kind of got excited at the start of this trading day when it had this sharp drop. I was like, okay, maybe we're actually going to get an opportunity here. Not quite. It went down to 78 and closed out the day, I don't know where. 80.
So are you waiting for the precise tick to add?
I thought you don't look at the price, Amir.
No, but you need to keep in mind that while, like, let's say 70, right? 70 and 78, that's like over a 10% overvaluation. So, I'm fine with being patient, even though like the dollar amount isn't too big. Like like in my investment approach, I'm fine being patient, and I'm okay with that. Like we need to keep in mind that we're not living in a void where Palantir is the only equity available to us. I mean, there are tons of very, very strong businesses publicly trading that are available to us, and it's up to us to allocate money to where we believe that we are seeing potentials for strong returns. And for me, that means, yeah, I'm fine being patient. But I read in chat, like speaking to valuation, and I've gotten DMs like this after. So let's say, well, Palantir will get this contract or this contract. What happens to your valuation then? And I think people are forgetting that the current price that Palantir is trading at is already implying likely that Palantir will get this contract, this contract, like for a valuation. If I have Palantir growing, let's say, for example, 40%, and they're not at 40%, that means my valuation already implies that Palantir will be receiving all of these contracts. So typically, because I'm very public with my valuation for Palantir will get a contract and someone will DM me, okay, what's the fair value now? I'm like, well, are they growing at 40%? Like it's already incorporated into it. Like I'm already expecting them to get these amounts of contracts. And speaking to that, I think it was really interesting to see Palantir held the DevCon this week, and we saw that XAI personnel were at DevCon presenting, implying that they use Palantir, which was really exciting. And we already know that Elon has been very positive towards Corp recently, and we've discussed the Doge, we've discussed the Tesla, SpaceX, and stuff like that historically. So I think the momentum is clearly there, and the people who are talking government efficiency are really leaning on to Palantir. So I think, as we mentioned, like even despite budget cuts, I think that might actually be very, very bullish for Palantir. And I might have underestimated the government growth, even though I have very high expectations of US government, I still think that, as Arnie mentioned, we may be making the mistake of undermining the true potential here. I mean, I think, as Arnie mentioned, we can only throw out our best guess as to what it might look like. But yeah, not quite. It's still a bit expensive, but it's getting normalized. So I'm fine with just being patient here. According to my understanding of the business, it's somewhere around $70, I would say. Fair value to me currently.
Okay, you know that I'm a number guy, so I always like to try to check what is happening with some numbers, like to have a sense. What I'm learning more and more with Palantir, as a guy who was living by making DCFs and equity reports, is that it's important to have a sense of, okay, what is the price is currently implying, but then at least on my side, trying not to be too attached, because being too attached to numbers was the exact reason why I completely missed Tesla explosion, despite following the company for a long time and being sure that sooner or later it would have exploded correctly. But as an analyst, I was looking at the numbers too much without really understanding the context. So my bottom line is, when you see something like, okay, the fundamentals keep improving. The price, yes, is expensive, but is somehow in very reasonable sense. And you see something like this, this chart that I like to post here and there of, okay, what is the current average analyst price showing compared with the actual price? And we see from this chart that essentially analysts tended to be over optimistic initially, but then they tend to stay behind the price, and especially at this range around the 20s, the analyst target price acted as a support, then again at 25 here a support, and we can see here how essentially the price moved way faster than analyst, and finally, after some exploding numbers in Q4, the average target price of analyst has risen up a lot, now converging to around what is this, like around 90, so the current average price. So will this act as a support again? We don't know, but frankly, I believe this is a relatively good hint that there is a way to justify from the institutional standpoint the current price, which also can give confidence to institutional investors of, okay, this is essentially the dip you were waiting for. You completely missed the run-up, but now you could be happy to add. And this combined with the sentiment, which frankly became very bad in no time. Like, I think we are much more sad now than we were happy 2 weeks ago when we had the initial spike.
Well, that's the thing. I think and this is the tough part about stocks, right? It's like once it goes up, again, personally, I feel most of us thought at 125 it was a bit ridiculous, and I was getting a lot of DMs from a lot of people as well, just like, dude, like it's valued basically at Salesforce's valuation with 1/15 of the revenue. Like, it doesn't make sense. But the chart looks so ugly when it collapses from there. But the collapse is inevitable, but it gets everyone so excited. And if no one actually sold at 125, that money was never real. And then the bears come out because, like, see, we told you it was a bubble. And it's like, well, all of us already knew at 125 it was extended. So it creates all these dynamics. But at the end of the day, if it even has the ability to get there, hopefully in the long term, it actually can sustain it. In the short term, it just feels painful because obviously your net worth takes a hit.
I mean, remember that 2 guys took the Nobel Prize for showing that we tend to suffer much more when we get a loss than we are happy when we get some gains.
You know, I've been thinking, shout out to the guy. I'm sure Amit might know who I'm talking about. I don't know this individual personally, but there was this guy that I sometimes have in my thoughts and prayers, and I really hope that he got an opportunity to get out. But there was this guy, you know, in the initial run up to 80, 85, he was posting on X how he's taking out like millions in margin to keep buying Palantir. And at the time, to me, I was like, this is the most insane thing I've seen. Like, this is like would top the charts on like Wall Street bets if in case this reverses. But then it went to 125 and he looked like a genius. And I just pray in my heart that he actually took some chips off the table, because if he like kept leveraging up to 125, shout out to that individual. Man, I don't want to know what happens to you here, but I really hope that he made a bank and managed to salvage some of that. But yeah, shout out to that guy, whoever you are. You are in my thoughts from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people obviously got pretty aggressive on the run up, and they were right until, you know, we had a retracement. But we had a retracement back to where we were at the beginning of Q3, or right before the beginning of the Q4 results, right? So as painful as it is, it's still up 12% year to date, and it's not doing too bad.